Hey, what's going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and welcome back to another episode of ModChat. In case you do not know, this is a podcast I like to do in two forms, video and audio. If you want a video version of this is available on the Mr. Mario 2011 channel. And if you are wanting this in audio-only form, like an actual podcast you would consume, this is available on most major podcasting websites and platforms. Simply open up your site or application of choice, look up ModChat from there, and subscribe if you wish to take the audio-only version with you wherever you go. Now, this is a series I try and do at least monthly, and for this month, December 2020, my goodness, this is the third episode of ModChat. There was a lot of Nintendo stuff that was going on, and then there was the news that I actually wanted to originally cover, and then I was thinking of covering this, and I kind of even alluded and hinted to it a tiny bit, thinking, maybe I'll do a third episode this month covering this, but my goodness, I wasn't expecting to do it so quickly, and I decided to do it in the form of a ModChat episode. Now, for anybody who's watching the video component, I'm just going to let you know I'm only going to be doing desktop and gameplay captures here, so I'm really not going to be bringing out my camera at all for this. However, this is just going to be talking about, well, the PS4, and we'll talk about the PS3 as well, too. So, first of all, the big news with the PS4. Yes, the 7.02 Jailbreak has been released. Now, for anybody who does not know, to get you all up to speed, TheFloW is the gentleman who ended up disclosing the original kernel exploit and then publicly releasing it that was leading to two jailbreaks. The first of which being the 6.72 jailbreak, and the second one being the 7.02 jailbreak. We were able to get the 6.72 jailbreak sooner simply because there was a WebKit exploit, which works through your internet browser, of course, which worked up to 6.72, but we didn't have anything higher. Well, recently that has changed. I'm going to have all the relevant links down below in the video description as I always do, but there is a great write-up here that you can check out, which is called This is for Pwners Exploiting a WebKit 0 Day in PlayStation 4. Now, this ended up releasing, this article here, released on December 10th of 2020, so at the time of, by the time this goes out, it will be a week prior, and this is centered around two people here, Mehdi Talbi and Quentin Meffrey, I believe that's how I say their names, and this just really covers how they were able to, of course, find and utilize a WebKit exploit to get arbitrary read-write execution, which is what we are looking for. We always need a WebKit exploit first, and then from there, if you pair a WebKit exploit with a kernel exploit, you're then able to jailbreak the system, which is what people are looking for. Now, essentially just a TLDR and skipping down here to the bottom, which is how this is useful for us, it's stating we managed to successfully exploit our bug on 6.xx firmware due to a weakness on ASLR implementation that allowed us to predict the address of HTML objects. The predictable address is hard-coded in the exploit and has been identified thanks to the bad hoist exploit. However, this is also saying that they were not able to successfully get this ported over to the 7.xx firmware. So they still ended up releasing the exploit here, which is available in the GitHub repository, but it was only verified by them by their own hands to work on the 6.xx firmwares, meaning this worked on firmware 6.72. Well, here we're going to come to Twitter, and there's also another person that we're seeing here yet again, sleirsgoevy, who actually ended up releasing the first working 6.72 jailbreak. So that is what, if you're on 6.72, that is what people have been using. They've really just been using that as a base. But this started on December 10th, where he said, regarding the new exploit disclosed at BHEU, could anybody run this or equivalent code on 5.05/other non-6.xx firmware and send the logs to me? So he was just trying to get some more information there. And the reason why this is being done is because it was saying here, once again, for those who didn't get the point, this link should be visited from your PS4, which is on 5.05. It is not a new exploit. All it does is collect some statistics that could be useful for porting the BHEU exploit to 7.02. So we already had the kernel exploit code, mind you, but we were working on getting the WebKit itself up to speed. Now, we saw a bit more of a breakthrough where on December 13th, he ended up tweeting out some valid 7.02 addresses and said, the success rate is about 10% for the last one. Unfortunately, the exploit then crashes in the critical section in leak.jsc. We'll now investigate how to fix it, and he was able to fix it a day later. At this point in the early morning hours of December 16th, he ended up releasing this little snippet right here in a screenshot, and when somebody asked, "What's this, pal?" he responded, "The kernel exploit just completed, now what's left is to just put Mira on top of it." So at this point here, I mean, by December 16th, there was Jailbreak. This is the Jailbreak. And he even ended up putting out a link here saying 7.02 netcat 9020 payload. Mira by Al-Aziz does not work yet. And mind you, I'm recording this on the 16th. This will go out about the middle of the day on the 17th. So I'm sure at this point, by the time you all are watching this, there's going to be Mira or HIN of some kind that will be working in some capacity. I do know that Mira is supposed to get ported over tonight, is what it looks like, but either way, people just need to get Mira or HIN working. But I mean, this is it right here. This is it. On 7.02, there is technically a jailbreak, which is publicly released, which can now be utilized to run what you need to. I'm going to point out the PS4 JB repository by sleirsgoevy, and yes, it does say here this is for firmware 6.72, and I'm sure this will be updated, but the original repository here is still being updated. Like, you can check up at the top, you know, about 6 hours ago, there was 7.02 stuff that was being added in here. WebKit 7.02, Mira 7.02, netcat 7.02, and I'll explain that in a bit. But yeah, I mean, this is it right here. This is the jailbreak itself is technically done. There's even a second one that went out by Chindo Chap, and this here is the PS4 5.05 to 7.02 kernel exploit. Summary here: in this project you'll find a full implementation of the IPv6 UAF kernel exploit for the PlayStation 4 for firmware 7.00 to 7.02. It will allow you to run arbitrary code as kernel to allow jailbreaking and kernel level modifications to the system, which will launch the usual payload launcher on port 9020. This bug was originally discovered by Fire30 and subsequently found by Andy Wynn, otherwise known as TheFloW. And really, you can come over here, click on this, and if you have the know-how, right now at this point, he even said it's a Frankenstein version of this, but if you're wanting to try this out yourself, you can certainly download the code either from sleirsgoevy or Chindo Chap, and host this yourself and try this out. Although I know there are a few self-hosted options out there. Now great, you have a PlayStation 4, you're excited, it's on low firmware, what do you do? Well, at this point in the game, so early on, I would recommend waiting. Because right now, for example, my PlayStation 4 right here, this is on 6.72. As you can see, I have a lot of games and applications and such on here, and the current way to jailbreak the system is pretty much going back to the 1.76 days, and here I'm going to explain it. So right now, the nice way of doing it, which we're all familiar with, is you make sure you have your DNS set up, you go to a user guide, you then wait for this to load up. From here, you pick your firmware, and then you load up Mira or HIN, or whatever other payloads you want to, and at that point, really, it's just you come here, you can load up Mira, and you're able to jailbreak the system. I mean, that's how it works. It's pretty easy to do. Now, at this moment, as you can see, Al-Aziz's host has not been updated to support 7.02 yet. And on top of that, the only thing that you can really do if you run the payload itself, if you host the website and you navigate to that page, you'll only get, if you are successful, you'll be able to run netcat. And netcat is essentially the payload launcher that you need. And as opposed to running all these payloads super easily from here, if you have ever seen or used a 1.76 PS4, I have some old videos when this PS4 right here was on 1.76. I have all that showing it. But essentially what you would need to do is you would need to go to a website, you would then need to run that jailbreak, so to speak. It was still a jailbreak, and then it would open up a port 9020 in which you could use a computer or a phone or another device to push a payload to that port, and you'd load the individual payloads. So essentially imagine you have a website here, and as opposed to it looking all nice, there's nothing really going on, you go to the website, it loads up the code it needs to, and then you just wait. And while you have it all up and running, as opposed to hitting any of these, like here I can literally just hit like dumper or FTP and enable it, you'd have to go out and find a FTP payload that has already been compiled and saved. And then you would have to go to your computer and use like command prompt or another application like netcat GUI to manually push the payload over to your PlayStation 4 to then enable FTP access. Like, look, I can press X on FTP, for example, and I'll show you how easy this is. So there's like the jailbreak portion, and then it brings this up, and that means that the payload has successfully loaded in, and we should have FTP access, and it's as easy as that. It was not as easy as this in 1.76. We're back to the 1.76 point right now, but that's only temporarily because, as I said, we need to get Hen ported over, we need to get Mira ported over, and then I'm sure that all the hosts like Elazif, Lethal, and several others will then follow suit with getting updated. However, for anybody who might think that this is not real, well, it certainly is real. It is confirmed to be working, and we even have one person here. I'm Mr. Nyato, I believe that's how you say your name there. He was able to get on his 7.02 PS4, he was able to get that updated, and then he was able to run the FTP payload, and he was able to access his PS4 over FTP. So that's why, for example, here, the FTP payload works. There are several other payloads out there that have been updated to 7.02 and they work, but we need Hen or we need Mira to be ported, and that's what we're waiting for, which will probably be released at this point. Like it'll probably be out there by the time this video goes out. The last thing I also want to discuss is the stability. Apparently people have said so far that even just the WebKit exploit itself, because sleirsgoevy, he first ended up porting the WebKit up to 7.02, and then he ended up creating, the jailbreak itself. But even the WebKit apparently was getting, pretty low success rate at, 10%, and I'd even seen people say it took like 30 tries for them to run it properly. So we're probably going to run into the same issue that we did initially with 6.72, meaning that the jailbreak goes out, and when it first gets out, it's going to be extremely unstable and there's going to be a very low success rate, but it will technically be possible. So with that reasoning as well too, I'm not going to advise people to immediately update to 7.02 yet. The only reasons why you would want to update to 7.02 are if you are on firmware 7.00 or 7.01. But if you're on 6.72 or lower, I would advise you to stay there until all the hosts are updated, until we know more information, until the stability is stabilized. Oh, and finally, just to get this out of the way here, I guess it's kind of wrapping up the topic. There's 2 points. One of them, people might be asking, hey, can I downgrade my PlayStation 4? You cannot downgrade your PS4 if it's already on a higher firmware. We've talked about firmware reverting here on ModChat, and I have an episode about that. So if you've been on a lower firmware and you backed up the data you needed to, and it's very, it's not an easy process, it's an advanced process. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, that means you have not done it. But if you have backed up the necessary data and such, and you've updated, you can revert back. But if you're already on a higher firmware, you cannot downgrade. So you will have to get a hold of a lower firmware PS4. There might also be some people who are asking, hey, how do I get a hold of a lower firmware PS4? And I've actually made a video covering that as well too, where I talked about how to get a hold of a lower firmware PS4 for 6.72 or 7.02. Now I did make it earlier this year, but I'm pretty confident that everything I said in there is still going to apply. So if you want to get a hold of a 7.02 PS4, it would be easier to get than a 6.72 PS4, but either way, that's still going to apply the same. So I have a video talking about, some information in regards to that. But yeah, that is about it. At this point here, we have the WebKit exploit, we have the kernel exploit, and we have the jailbreak. We just have to wait for the stability to come and everything to be updated for it, which is really awesome to see. Now for our second topic this episode, I wanted to talk about the PlayStation 3 with the 4.87 update. I did talk about it a couple episodes ago in which it did come out and we were waiting for things to be updated. And in short, PlayStation 3 Hen or PS3 Hen has been updated. we already had pretty immediately, just a few hours after the 4.87 update rolled out, we had 4.87 HFW hybrid firmware, which was updated and released by Juni. And then a few days later, we had the PS3 exploit team update and release PS3 HEN 3.0.2, which right here in the changelog, HEN has been updated to support 4.87 HFW. The payload has been updated to support 4.87 HFW. Cobra PS3 MAPI changes updated to identify 4.87 firmware. And for the resource changes, updated HEN loader category _ game.xml to use new icon thanks to XPS3 experiments. That's kind of what it's supposed to be. I have personally used this. I've also tested it as well too, and I will say, just as a quick note on here, do not attempt, unless you are testing for PS3 exploit, do not try to get leaked or unfinished builds of PS3 HEN. I know at one point there was a build that was leaked out from PS3 HEN. It was in testing, but it was leaked out, and even Jason here, Escort Do, he advised do not use that one because it's pretty unusable. Like, it will cause a kernel panic if you try and launch any homebrew. And when I was testing it with Escort Do, I actually mentioned that to him when I was testing that same build. So I kind of laughed a bit at the time when I was like, people are really desperate to get a leaked version of this that doesn't work because it's in testing right now. But thankfully it was resolved, so it was pretty easy for him to resolve it, and we got it all sorted out. But yeah, just kind of that quick note on there as well too. PS3 Exploit, that team, they're awesome, they're incredible, love the guys over there, and they always deliver on their work. So if there's a new PS3 update out, and PS3 HEN or the toolset or what have you hasn't been updated, just wait for the official channels to be updated and you'll get your stuff. Now with PS3 HEN out of the way, there are people who have jailbroken PlayStation 4s who then unjailbroke them because they updated to 4.87 official firmware, and there's also people who are wanting to jailbreak their PlayStation 4s, but they are on 4.87 official firmware and they don't have a software-only method of doing so. So for those people, there is some news here where, first of all, if you have a custom firmware system and you're wanting to update to a new 4.87 custom firmware, there seems to be only one which is on the scene right now, and this comes in the form of Evilnat's custom firmware, which has Cobra 8.20 built in. Now, in case Evilnat does not sound familiar, Evilnat is the same developer behind SEN Enabler, which is quite a popular application that people use to run on lower firmware custom firmwares to get them spoofed and up to date so they can run on PlayStation Network. But either way, he has come out and decided to make a custom firmware because he did not see any others that were out there. Now, right here, just a few of the features are it's made out of 4.87 official firmware, of course. It allows for SEN or PSN access. It can be installed over 3.55 official firmware or any other CEX custom firmware. It has Cobra 8.20, and it has a whole lot of other good stuff here, which I guess in short, when it comes to this, if you are familiar with using any other Cobra-enabled custom firmware, such as Rebug, this will most likely run about the same for you if you're just kind of a casual user. You're not like a hard developer on this. So if you've used anything else with Cobra-enabled, this will be about the same. And it seems to be a solid firmware from what I'm seeing. Oh, and for people who are on a lower firmware, such as 4.84 Rebug Rex or 4.86 Rebug Lite, really just for people who either don't want to use Evilnat's custom firmware, or if they don't want to update off of Rebug until there's a new version that is out. As I said, pretty immediately, Evilnat, he is the maintainer of SEN Enabler, and if you're one of those people who you want to take your custom firmware enabled PlayStation 3 online, you can download the latest version of SEN Enabler, you run it, and it allows you to spoof your console to 4.87 and get back online easily enough. Now, this is something that I personally don't use. I personally don't really care for because I just don't use my PlayStation 3 for online play at all. I really don't. And I'm not interested in PlayStation Network access. But I know there's several people who are. So I'm sure if you are interested in that, you already have SEN Enabler. Now, of course, to anybody who is still waiting for PlayStation 3s to be jailbreakable via software-only methods on 4.87 using the BG Toolset, otherwise known as BG Toolset here on PS3 Exploit, it is still only compatible up to 4.86 official firmware. So all we can do is wait on that. At this point, technically, it can be updated. Really, the process is, once there's a new update out, there needs to be a custom firmware that is made. Once a custom firmware is made, BG is typically able to create the patch that is needed to patch official firmware to allow writing of custom firmware onto it using this patch here. So really the next step I'm saying here is once BG has the time and is able to take a look at it and is able to, test and issue a patch, then 4.87 can be jailbroken via the toolset. However, if you're on a custom firmware PS3, I'd advise just sit where you're at right now, be happy with what you have, you're all good to go. If you have a PlayStation 3 that has been updated or you're already on 4.87, I'd recommend giving PS3 SEN a try. Even if you're just temporarily waiting for custom firmware, you might be surprised at how good PS3 SEN is for what it is, being not a custom firmware and being as robust as it is. So that is about it for this episode of ModChat. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully this helped you all out, and hopefully we'll see some awesome new support and stability for 7.02, the jailbreak itself on PlayStation 4. For anybody who's asking when can we expect a tutorial, I'm going to be checking out the landscape and seeing what is going to be available, how the stability looks, and once it gets to a point where I think it's good for daily use, much like 6.72 was, I will then make a video. I know I made a video, like a tutorial showing how to set it up, about a month after the initial 6.72 jailbreak released, and I'm hoping that we'll see the progress that got that up to a stable point. I'm hoping we'll see that progress happen much sooner, but either way, the most important thing is the kernel exploit was out, we have a WebKit exploit, and now the jailbreak is out, it is real, it has been publicly released. So we just need to wait at this point a bit more, unless you are working to actively test it and debug it, and at that point, definitely a big thank you to you all. Anyways, really that's about it for this episode of ModChat. Man, 3 episodes of ModChat in 1 month. You love to see it, I guess. And now, typically at the end of these episodes, I like to have a word. And if you use this word in a comment on the YouTube upload, I'll know you made it to the end. So how about we use Miami as the word, like you're seeing on screen if you're watching the video. If you use the word Miami in your comment on the YouTube upload, I'll know you made it to the end. What do you think of Miami? Have you been to Miami? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you like Hotline Miami? Are you questioning why Vice City was modeled so closely or so loosely off of Miami? I'm not sure at this point. Just use that word and I'll know you made it to the end of this episode. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you all for listening and watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, a like would absolutely be appreciated. If you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too. Stay warm out there, stay safe, and I guess I'll be talking with you all later.